Hello, everyone. Welcome. This is the AI for Good panel. If you're looking for the AI for Bad panel, it's down the hall. We considered the AI for creepy stuff panel, but decided against it. Maybe we'll do that next time. But in all seriousness, we're at a moment, right? Things are happening with AI. Unfortunately, most of the thing that's actually come to life has been bad-ish, right? Or at least profitable rather than good stuff, particularly good stuff for the vulnerable populations we all seek to serve. And there is a lot of hype, a lot of misunderstanding. And so what we thought we would do here is unpack some of that, right? We have some excellent speakers. What we'll do is, number one, I'll put on my sort of professor hat and try to do a little bit of an AI 101. We will then see what are the applications. Some places it can work today. Some places, frankly, it's not ready yet. Right? We should wait until there's just more stuff, more maturity, more data, and so on and so forth. And importantly, what are some of the caveats? We will be joined by my good friend, Jim Fruchterman, who's very well known to the Skoll community, one of the most respected voices in tech for good. And then after that, we'll have 4 speakers talking about their work. And it's in agriculture, it's in just environmental stuff, it's in government engagement, and so on and so forth. And after that, we'll do a breakout, which will be really interesting with so many people standing. But please, if you can, at that point, sort of crowd in. And we'll talk at the end of the speakers, we'll talk about what we can do, how to get the most out of the breakout sessions. So, what is AI? It's a little bit like saying, what is consciousness? What is happiness? Right? What is all that? The reason, and I say this because, I, like Jim, we consider ourselves kind of old AI dudes from way back, right? I believe personally that the mistake that the AI community made was actually calling it the I in the AI, right? Which is, this is not about simulating human intelligence. We're not there despite all the hype. We may never get there. Maybe we'll get to some approximation of what looks like it, right? But the way I tend to think about it is, it's just pattern recognition. What that means is you give a bunch of data points, and you fit a curve, right? And depending on what you're using the application for, let's say you're trying to profile someone, right? Either for security reasons or for bank loan reasons. All you're saying is, here's the curve. Is this new applicant? Is this new person? Where are they on the curve? This end, that end, in the middle. Likewise, all the hype these days is about large language models and ChatGPT. All it is you throw a bunch of sentences, bunch of paragraphs, bunch of books, right? And it's just recognizing what the next word, the next sentence, the next paragraph, the story within that, right? It is incredibly impressive, but that's all it is, right? And any hype you hear about, wow, this is sentient, it is frankly garbage. Right. So now, what's the problem with it? The problem is that if you give it the wrong data, if you give it insufficient data, we can fool ourselves into thinking it is complete. More importantly, if you give it data from context A and use it in context B, it will be highly misleading. Lead to all sorts of potentially dangerous decisions, dangerous conclusions. So where we are now is, again, caught in a lot of hype. It is important for us to take a step back, figure out, okay, where does this work? Where is it too early? And our good friend, Jim, is about to come here and explain all of that. Come on, Jim.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. All right, so, Jim, I'll ask you an easy question.
Yep.
We've heard of this thing called a large language model.
Yep.
Why is language not knowledge?
Because the computers are still dumb as bricks. I mean, it gives the simulation of intelligence, but it isn't intelligent. It gives the simulation of empathy or understanding, but when it says the wrong thing, it has no idea. So it's not knowledge, and in the field we have all sorts of funny names. It's a stochastic parrot. It's spicy autocomplete. It's a spell checker on steroids. but that's what the AI people talk about large language models. And so, if you want it to kind of help you figure out how to do a sonnet in the style of Motley Crue, it's pretty good. But if you wanted to advise a farmer on what to plant, oh my, don't do that.
Great. So, thank you.
Was that the optimistic answer
That
you're
is
hoping for?
very well. It'll
delivered.
Get, yeah. So, do we need it? We in our community where we're trying to do good.
Oh, well, if we go back to AI or machine learning, as I, was when I was in the field, that's what we used to call it. Do we need it? Absolutely. The nonprofit sector is trying to do more and more with not a lot of resources. Our people are overstressed. There's 10 times more demand for our help than we have time. And so there are, I am in this field because my venture capitalist vetoed a project to help disabled people with AI. And it really, really, really helps disabled people. It's amazing. So we have to find those good applications. We have to manage when it doesn't work. But the thing is, and I joke, I spend a lot of my time talking to nonprofit leaders about tech. And I jokingly call it my anti-consulting practice. Because 95% of the time, what they show up with is not a great idea. You don't need a blockchain. Don't build that app. And if it comes up to AI, 95% of the time, it's probably not going to work very well. But there is that 5%, and that's what so many of the really exciting nonprofits, the Skoll Award winners, we're going to be using AI because we're going to have teams to make sure the AI actually works.
Okay, so I've heard of this thing called ChatGPT.
Yeah.
I want to save the world with it.
Yeah.
What advice would you give me?
Well, again, let's use the spell checker on steroids example, right? Spell checkers have been using more and more AI year on year. First, I don't recognize this word, then your grammar's not right. That's AI, or at least it was until it started to work. We'll come back to that one. And so now it's able to generate, take that 500-word answer and fit it into the 300-word block that the donor makes you fill it into, right? But you can't just hand it off. Because it's going to get facts wrong, it's going to compress something into something that doesn't make sense. It's going to give the illusion of being better written than you'll write it. But if you read it carefully, so we use it as a source of ideas, a source of concepts of how do I cut this in half. But we don't use it for fact checking because it doesn't know facts. At least not today.
So there was this buzzword a few years back, right?
Yeah.
Big data.
Yeah.
Can we talk about that?
Oh, man. So we have a semi-monopoly of big companies that have big data, right? You go to Microsoft or Apple or Amazon or Netflix, and they have data from hundreds of millions of people. And you go in our sector, and we have hundreds of thousands of organizations that have smaller amounts of data. So almost no nonprofits have big data. And this is a giant barrier to training AI, right? You've got to have data for the AI. And right now, oh man, ChatGPT is trained on American middle-class content. That's not very good in Thailand, I hate to say, and anywhere else. So one of the things we have to do is try to get the more representative and diverse data from the world that represents the issues that we have to do, and then use it to train these models. And I think you'll know how to work this in. We're launching a new movement to try to do that here at Skoll called the Better Deal for Data, bd4d.org. How do we ethically collect the data that we're going to need to train the AI models that this sector desperately needs? And right now, we really don't have the data in a form or a place where we're going to use it.
So how do we know whether we have enough data to use stuff?
Rules of thumb, I hear if you have 100,000 chat conversations in a given language, you can probably do a decent job these days, especially if you're trying to do something pretty basic and very constrained to a certain issue. But
how do I know that? Meaning that I am interested in using it for application.
So here's the thing: 99.9% of nonprofits should not be doing their own AI project by themselves because 99.9% of nonprofits don't have tech people. Tech people, that's what they do, and you don't need a lot of tech people. But a quarter-time data scientist could tell you whether or not you have enough data. How do they do that? They run an experiment, and they test it. And the biggest issue about AI is it makes a lot of mistakes. Everyone thinks it's like this oracle that doesn't make mistakes. What if it makes the mistake that ends your organization? Don't let it do that. You have to manage those mistakes. And how do you do that? You run experiments and see, okay, what could go wrong? Oh, that went wrong. Can I manage that? And you're going to hear from some great people here who have figured out how to manage that. I'm looking at you, Rikin. So anyway, hopefully that was helpful.
It was. So let me give you a few examples of where I've been excited about potential applications. And so just let's unpack that and see, A, whether I'm smoking something or whether this is real, or, and if it is, sort of why, right? Okay. So one of the things I've been most excited about is sort of automated image-based diagnostics. So for example, if in a low-income setting, let's say you have access to an ultrasound, but not people who can read it, can you analyze the ultrasound images and sort of diagnose things like whether it's likely to be a low birth weight baby, the prediction of gestational age, and so on and so forth.
Great application. It started where I started my career. The challenge is, what if it gives you the wrong answer, right? And so genetic testing is a great example. You need someone to interpret the genetic testing, decide what you're going to do about it. But one of the big issues we're going to have, and it's going to be a really big issue, is what if the current standard is you get nothing? Yep. And AI is going to help you get something that's pretty good. And you figured out what happens when the AI makes a mistake and you kind of manage that down. Then it's probably ethical to use it. But that's what we have to think about the people who we're inflicting this technology on, and is it really making their lives overall better, and can we help them when it gives them the wrong answer? And sometimes a wrong answer in medical areas could be it doesn't diagnose your cancer, and you come back in and it's your stage 4 and you're hopeless.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Nothing like a bright
All right.
note.
Let's bring out our stars.
Okay.
And I won't read their bio, but I will say one interesting thing about each person. The first speaker, Kate Kallot from Amini. She'll be talking about environmental data and how it can help grassroots activists, farmers, and so on and so forth. One really interesting point about Kate is Time magazine called her the rising star of African AI. So, rising star, rise.
Hi, everyone. Thank you. Thank you for having me today. I'm going to talk about AI, but more importantly about data. I actually come from a country called Central African Republic, CAR. If you're familiar with the geography, it's landlocked in the middle of Africa. And in my country, we have one national dish, and it's called gunja. It looks like this. If some of you have gone to Congo, it's very similar to sakasaka. It's based on cassava leaves. You eat it with manioc, with rice. Can be based on fish or beef. It's like a rich stew. Everybody knows in the countries that this is our favorite dish. And I'm very conscious that last year a chatbot rocked our world. And finally, my mom started to understand what I actually do in my day job. So I did a little experiment, and I asked this chatbot to tell me about gunja. Obviously, didn't know. So I changed my prompt and asked it about CAR's national dish, and it gave me a very surprising answer. Poulet nyembwe. I've actually never heard of this dish. But upon doing a little bit more research, I actually realized that, find out that poulet nyembwe looks like this, and it's Gabon's national dish. So if you're really familiar with geography, Gabon and Central African Republic do not share a border, right? We're Francophone countries. This is about where it stops. So we can give it the benefit of the doubt. I looked for poutine, I looked for hockey pocky, got it right? And then I decided to go on the other side of the world, and I asked a friend from Colombia to give me one fact that every Colombian knows, but that the rest of the world doesn't. And he told me about El Perilino dance. So I asked the chatbot to tell me about El Perilino dance. And the chatbot described that dance that is inherited from Spanish folklore and Afro-Caribbean heritage, that it is from the Barranquilla region bordering the Caribbean Sea. And it's a dance that's very much ingrained in Colombian culture and has been passed from generation to generation. Beautiful, right? Well, actually, I found out that this is El Pirulino, and it's not a dance that has been passed from generation to generation. It was actually born out of a very famous Colombian telenovelas 20 years ago. It's a dance from a TV show, right? So why is this happening? Well, 2 stats for you. 180 million is the number of users of that said chatbot today. 2.6 billion people, in contrast, is the number of people that are still unconnected in the world today, right? When we say unconnected, we mean unrepresented, unmeasured, misunderstood. But in reality, we mean invisible. And it's especially the case when you think about Africa. Africa is the most data scarce continent. And that data scarcity spans many different types of data. Everything we take for granted, even be it weather data, is very difficult to get access to when it comes to the continent. So what would a data-driven transformation for Africa, and I'm going to expand even to the rest of the global south, look like? Well, it looks like this. In the middle, in blue, it's Mr. Martin. Mr. Martin is a farmer in Kenya, in the region of Nyeri, which is the Kofi County. And the first time I met Mr. Martin, I asked him, like, so how do you get your weather data? He pointed at the mountain next to us, and he said, Kate, you see this mountain? When there are clouds, I know it's going to rain. But, sometimes it's not that accurate. Obviously. So we started working with Mr. Martins and other Mr. Martins in the same region, and we started generating data at the farm level, understanding crops, soil health, weather. That data was given to an insurance company to design insurance products that are better adapted to Mr. Martin's, his region, and his farming practices. That same data went to a bank and has allowed to unlock microfinance against yields for Mr. Martin. That same data from millions of Mr. Martins in Kenya has been aggregated at a country level to better food security and strengthen climate resilience for them. That same data goes to a global private sector company that actually allows you to buy the coffee from the supermarket that they're sourcing from Mr. Martin to report to regulators. But ultimately, data is information, right? So who is the actor alongside that entire value chain that will make one decision that will influence everyone else in that value chain? And that's Mr. Martin. Mr. Martin needs to get access to that data in a way that is free, digestible, accessible, but also non-exploitative. And that's what we do at Amini. We are a data infrastructure company. We digitize data that has never been digitized before for Africa and the global south. And when I say global south, I mean it. We're helping an entire nation in the Caribbean digitizing records dating back the 1600s. They were used as a port of entry for slave trade. This is data that has never been seen online before. We aggregate data from the ground, from millions of Mr. Martin, combine it with geospatial data, environmental data, climatic, weather, other types of data sets to generate for Mr. Martin and the entirety of the value chain actionable insights. We see data, not AI. AI is a tool which will help us scale, but we see data as the real seeds for transformation. Data creates transparency, transparency creates trust, and trust accelerates investment. If you trust what you have, you will buy it, right? So that is our mission. We are the data backbone for Africa and the global south. So we are not left behind in this transition. We are visible, our data is visible, and I hope that at some point my kids will be able to know what Gunja is. Thank you.
So I feel like I have to correct Time magazine. I don't think you're a rising star. I think you're the North Star of this whole thing. Allow me to welcome Debbie Rogers, Reach Digital Health. She works on delivery of healthcare, and she'll talk to us about how data can help with patient care. In this context, the coolest thing about Debbie is she is last year's winner of the Skoll Award. And welcome, Debbie.
Thanks so much, and thanks for that great introduction, Kate. I think you covered a lot of the really good fundamentals. I'm going to talk a little bit about healthcare and some of the challenges that we face in sub-Saharan Africa particularly. We have about 11% of the world's population, 24% of the disease burden of the world, and 3% of the health workers. So it's not really surprising that we have really poor statistics for health on the continent. And it's not really surprising that the few health workers who are there are demotivated, stressed, and under-resourced. So we believe that mobile technology connects the health system with people and communities and provides us a way to be able to scale communication to various different patients and to meet them where they are and when they need it, rather than them having to always go through to a clinic. Not replacing healthcare, but ensuring that people access the right healthcare at the right time, and therefore can improve the burden on the health system. So we've got some pretty large-scale programs. We've reached over 100 million users with our work in 21 languages in 200 countries and territories. We work in eight health domains, and we send 2.5 million messages a month, which is a fair amount of data. And so you can imagine that AI is pretty much the topic that everyone wants to talk to us about. And we do use AI, but we use it in a couple of different ways, and I wanted to just introduce two different ways that we use the AI. The first is that we did not build this. We worked with a company called Ada Health. They've spent hundreds of millions of dollars building a diagnostic engine, but it was only accessible to the global north. And so what we did is we worked with them to integrate their app through our Mom Connect program in South Africa so that the 4.5 million mothers on the platform could access really sophisticated symptom diagnosis algorithms just as if they were having a chat with their friend over WhatsApp. And we were able to provide some data that said that we would save $65 per patient for the healthcare system by using this chatbot. So that's one way, is to adapt something or adopt something that somebody else has built. And I think it's very important to think about that in this space because we do not have the money in the nonprofit space that many of the for-profits have. But that doesn't mean that we can't access really incredible AI. The other thing that I want to talk about, though, is that health education alone is not going to change enough things. Telling somebody that they need to wear a condom is very different to empowering them to speak to their partner about using a condom. So how do we think about targeting messages to people? Well, we used to start with things like stage-based messaging, taking people on a journey. We then started segmenting into different profiles. We would have, say, 5 or 6 different profiles of people, and then we would classify everybody according to the profile. And then we started looking more at risk score personalization and hyper-personalization, so that every single person on the platform is receiving the information that they need to receive at that point in time. So what does this look like? Well, its an interface is the mobile phone. It's simple SMS or WhatsApp or other chat channels. And we gather user insights. From that, we pinpoint the barriers that might be stopping somebody from completing a behavior that they need to complete. We map the risk factors that they might have specifically, and we therefore create a personalized set of messaging that we know that that person, that individual needs. So what does this look like for, say, for example, Nandi, who we need to help make better decisions about her pregnancy? Well, we've got the risk engine, and what it does is it looks at barriers like things like it might be knowledge, but it might also be mental health. Perhaps she has a very low locus of control. We map different risks like self-efficacy and literacy, and we then look at the clinical outcomes that we would want to have and use that to create an intervention set. And that means that Nandi gets messages about her pregnancy that are stage-based. So it's according to the stage of her pregnancy. At 5 weeks pregnant, she gets messaging for 5 weeks pregnant. She gets coping strategies to help her deal with stressful decisions. She is empowered to adopt healthier eating habits. And she can connect with free services and experts whenever she needs to be flagged for immediate attention. So this is a journey for Nandi, And doing this for Nandi is complicated. You know, you have to get a lot of information from her. You have to be able to decide what you want to achieve, and then you have to deliver it to her. But sending it to millions of people and understanding the specific needs of millions of Nandis is complex. And that's where AI comes in. This is where we can really use AI for the right type of purpose. And sorry, it is an architecture diagram, but I had to put it in. Essentially, what we do is we analyze all the user data to create a profile, and the profiler is an AI engine. And then we take our knowledge base and we recommend the right content to the right person according to that profile. But just a word of warning, AI is everywhere. Everyone wants to sprinkle some AI onto something. I think Jim did an excellent job of explaining why that is not necessarily the case. But think very carefully. This is a hammer looking for, is this a hammer looking for a nail, or are you actually solving a problem where AI is going to change your impact? And that's really where you want to be able to invest in AI. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Debbie. You can see why she won the award. There are many takeaways from that. The one thing that stuck, my mind is not in the gutter, but when you said sort of assist the conversation about wearing condoms, I can see if our partner doesn't wear a condom, we go to them and say, honey, ChatGPT says you have to wear a condom. All right, our next speaker, Rikin Gandhi, Digital Green. Rikin's going to talk about extension services for smallholder farmers, which is essentially training and sharing information with them. He's won multiple awards. I've known him for a very long time and always thought he was smart. And I think I finally figured out why. He's got a master's degree from MIT in aeronautical and astronautical space engineering. Rikin, the bar is set high.
Thank you. Thanks, Shashi. Great to be here with all of you. So what we've been doing at Digital Green since we started 18 years ago was to see how can we leverage digital technology to improve the efficiency and impact of existing agricultural development programs, especially those that are focused on extension and trying to build climate resilience in a gender-inclusive way. And we've partnered with great NGOs, many of whom are in the Skoll community, as well as various ministries of agriculture and rural development across India, Ethiopia, Kenya, and Nigeria. And the way we've done it was using videos that would be produced by and for farmers to share improved sustainable agriculture practices in the form of testimonials and demonstrations. And the first questions that people ask before they see the economics of a particular practice is, what's the name of the person in the video, and which village is he or she from? Along the way, we've been able to take this work to scale to now more than 100,000 odd extension agents to serve more than 6 million odd farmers. And we've been able to show that this doesn't replace the existing extension systems, but it augments the existing extension agents who are out in the field, otherwise conducting farmer field schools and demonstration plots, and improves the frequency at which they're able to interact with the communities in a voice of local farmers that people are able to relate with and see if these folks that they watch on video are applying these practices, then perhaps they can for themselves too. About 2 years ago, we saw the opportunity of generative artificial intelligence as a way to flip the model, to really put farmers at the center of being able to decide what pieces of information do I really care about? Because they're at the front lines of climate change. They are having to navigate making experiments on their fields about what works and what doesn't in stress-prone conditions. And these videos that were already produced in local languages with these communities themselves could then be auto-transcribed and translated and then made accessible on platforms that these community members were already on, like WhatsApp and Telegram, and where they can use local language voice notes and text to be able to ask their questions and be able to get surfaced a relevant video that pertains to their question, and also give their feedback about what works and what doesn't. And what you're seeing here in that screenshot over there is an example of what's called agentic AI. As Kate actually mentioned, in some places there's more data than others. But as an example, in India, there are services like the Meteorological Department that puts out weather forecasts. And in some cases, many farmers ask about what is the rainfall expected in my village this week. So in that case, we don't need to go down the very complex AI routine. We can actually just go and parse that person's query and call the database of the Indian Meteorological Department and answer that person's question. In other cases, people are asking more complex questions, like should I sow? Should I harvest now? And then you go to the complexity of integrating the weather and other types of static video or other fact sheet type of information. And what's exciting about this is that it's not just a one-way channel. Farmers are able to also give their feedback, extension agents as well. And just like the video approach, what we're doing is augmenting the existing extension agents such that when the bot fails, which it does, then it's able to route the query and the person who's asking it to the proximate farmer cooperative or the extension agent. We've been able to see that this has been able to improve the efficiency of extension from $35 US down to 35 cents. Just to open up a little bit of the black box of AI, what we're trying to build is what we consider digital public infrastructure so that multiple organizations can contribute their own content in various formats with governance to ensure that there's alignment towards the climate and gender goals that we're all collectively after, and ensuring that these systems aren't biased to our particular, let's say, conventional agriculture activity. And we can do that with mechanisms of stewardship anchored by government and farmers themselves, and with what's called golden question answers to be able to tune these models towards the expected ways in which farmers and extension agents expect to use them. There's a lot of work to be done to make these systems locally relevant, as was been shared on the panel with Shashi and Jim, to be able to ensure that the vocabulary of how people speak in local languages is appropriate, and that we're creating a stack that is open source so that people aren't locked in to proprietary systems, and that there's flexibility since this field of AI is developing way faster than any of us can keep up with, and we want to be able to interchange systems such that we can have benchmarks over what is actually good in terms of quality of responses, cost, and latency. Finally, no technology should be seen as a silver bullet, artificial intelligence included. All of you who are doing various interventions in various sectors, who are working on some of these fundamental building blocks of physical infrastructure, human capital, political institutions, and finance are necessary precursors before a tool like artificial intelligence can complement that work and increase its efficiency and impact. And so I'm so thrilled to be with all of you today. Thank you.
Thank you, Rikin. I would say that in the space of agricultural extension, digital green, Rikin's work has been phenomenal, probably the most impressive anywhere in the world. Let's turn to our next speaker, Antaraa Vasudev from Civis. And she'll talk about citizen engagement through public comment for public policy. Welcome. And the most interesting factoid I found about Antaraa is, so Asia is a large place, right? So she was listed as 30 under 30 in Asia. Take it away.
Thank you, Shashi. Thank you all for having me here today. My name is Antaraa Vasudev, and I come from India, an organization called Civis. India, as we know, is a large country. But one thing that I feel like we don't realize is that we are 1.3 billion people. And everyone, trust me, everyone has an opinion. Now, in a democracy where each voice holds weight, how do you ensure that we actually move conversations from conflict to consensus in a way which is constructive? That is some of the work that Civis is looking to demystify. We're an organization that believes that laws that are made for citizens should be made with citizens. And along the way, we use some AI and technology to be able to bridge that gap. What you see here is the ratio of directly elected parliamentarians in India to the number of citizens. There's one parliamentarian directly elected to 23 lakh or 2.3 million citizens. That chasm is huge. So how, again, do we actually work on building conversation which is constructive and leads to meaningful development outcomes? At Civis, we have one example that we love to talk about. In 2020, there was a law which had come out for the transgender community, which enabled them to get a transgender identity card and entitled benefits. Now, all well-intentioned, that particular law had many clauses which weren't friendly to the community, which would make it inconvenient for them to actually access their entitlements. So, through the process of public consultation in India, where essentially citizens are asked for their feedback on draft laws and policies, we engaged with the government and the community. We enabled citizens to understand that law in easy-to-understand language, free of all the complicated legal jargon. We then worked with community members to gather their feedback. And this feedback was something as simple as, your form says the first name and last name is mandatory, but I don't identify with my family name, and I would like to have the option of submitting this form without putting that in. A simple input given to the government at the right time, one voice heard, ensures that today, almost 4 lakh transgender people are able to access their identity cards and the associated benefits. At Civis, we believe that there is a lot of power in surfacing information. So we undertake a very arduous task of ensuring that all draft laws that come out in the public domain are actually aggregated on a common platform. This sometimes means looking at the corners of newspapers or corners of government websites. We then work with a community of volunteer lawyers to be able to simplify these draft laws and help people make sense of what it implies in their day-to-day lives. This is where things start to get interesting. What if I was just given one summary? One summary doesn't apply to everybody. So using AI, we have built a chatbot that actually enables, let's see if this plays. Oops. Oh, all right. That actually enables communities to be able to ask questions on that particular policy or law. It enables them to say, hi, I'm part of this community. What does this law really mean for me? And the information that comes back to them actually helps them take stronger and better decisions. We also work on the flip side to ensure that citizens' voices are represented from low-income and marginalized communities. And we do this with an incredible network of partners, one of which is Gramvani. With them, we share information about draft laws in voice, and you can call into one of their numbers and actually gather and learn information about a draft law. You can also then just press a simple button to record your feedback in voice. We have inputs pouring in from across the country where citizens are able to actually share their opinions on draft laws. And the beauty of this lies in the fact that we can synthesize all of that vast amount of data, all of that very disparate information, and make it such that it enables decision making. So we take citizens' voices to the lawmakers. But I think oftentimes we forget that governments themselves have their own constraints. In certain cases, we have little to no feedback. Or when we do actually have a lot of inputs, chances are that it's so overwhelming that governments aren't able to go into it in great depth. And then what is the point of sharing our voice? So Civis works to ensure that there are AI-enabled dashboards that actually help enable governments to be able to understand data and understand citizens' voices using simple clustering of feedback. We work with different government departments to be able to pull out key focus areas that they should work on and also inform policymaking with these tools. I think there's a lot of conversation around AI, some of it good, some of it a little bit scary. But I think one of the reasons for optimism and one of the opportunities that I see that exists today is that we finally have an opportunity to co-create. We have a new and emerging tool that each of us can help shape and each of us can help build the guardrails for. And if there's one thing that I'd love to leave you all with today, it is just that. It's to participate and co-create. Thank you.
Thank you, Antaraa. You know, I grew up in India, and the idea of actually having a voice in policy, it was unfathomable. And in particular, if you came from a disadvantaged community, again, just impossible. And so this is incredible work. Thank you for sharing all your thoughts and insights. And let me just quickly summarize a couple of points before we go into our breakouts. One is that each of them's actually identified a problem that needed to be solved before jumping into, let me use AI, right? So depending on where you're sitting, your funder, your board, you are getting asked, trust me, right? You're getting asked, or you will be asked, how are you using AI? Right? And my own rule of thumb is for whatever my projects are, the problems I'm trying to work on are, what are the 5 biggest things I need to solve? Many of those don't have anything to do with technology. In all likelihood, none of them currently are suitable for AI. In the event that it is, it's a very targeted use. And as you said, right now, the one tool available is a chatbot, and they're using it in a very measured manner. So with that, let's go into our breakout sessions. And just a couple of quick thoughts. We have 25 minutes. There are printouts on your table of specific questions. I won't read out the questions, but essentially, the whole point of that discussion should be, name one practical thing you've learned today and what you'll do with it in your organization. You may or may not have a facilitator on your table. If you don't, then one of you should just put your hand up, please. And report back your insights. My suggestion on the insights, my guidance on the insights is 1, maybe 2 points, 10 words or fewer. And people, let's be brilliant about it. All right? Okay, let's break out, and I will hover. All right, everyone. If I could whistle, I would. That's the best I can do for a whistle. All right. I hope you enjoyed the conversations. So let's do this. So let's go table by table. And yeah, let's go table by table, starting here. And then as I requested, so 1, maybe 2 points, 10 words or fewer, absolutely brilliant. Take it away.
Okay. So there was still lingering fear, concern about potential. Oops.
Would you mind repeating?
Okay. There was a lingering fear, concern about the exploitation, monetization of data. If we build things with our data, others' data, where does that go? So that was the first takeaway from what we heard. At the same time, there's a lot of experimentation about different ways that it can be used. For example, LLMs can help people to have better conversations in dealing with conflict. Deliberative tech can help people to solve problems better. And lots of ways to make the organization more efficient and maybe deliver the services better. But a little bit of more questions than answers at our table.
Makes a lot of sense. Thank you.
All right, so for a lot of us, it became simpler to understand in seeing it in these ways that it was shared today. Some of the mask was taken off of it and seeing some of the practical applications. And we've seen applications across sectors, so folks named arts, finance, geopolitics, and as mentioned over here as well, seeing the opportunity to do things either faster or cheaper, but there is still that concern of, is it an added skill set that folks need to develop, or will it replace jobs or positions in a meaningful way? So,
thank you.
I think people who were skeptical at AI were somewhat validated. I think people didn't realize that the data sets are not as representative as they might have hoped, and that data really is the issue at the core of AI. A lot about the value of keeping it simple, don't overcomplicate things, put power in the hands of the users and make them more powerful, augment them, don't replace them.
We talked about how NGOs are grappling with how to use foundational models such as from OpenAI, etc., versus open source. A number are using a range of partners and mixing some of the services that you're using. So, taking one service from here and taking another service from another place. Also, we talked about data sets, especially in the context of health. Mixing of data sets, possibly LLMs can help possibly accelerate some of that work. Computer vision for satellite imaging, for either for conflict scenarios or whatever it could be, or for development, cost savings, but also concerns about cost savings replacing people rather than enhancing the productivity and the work of the organization, and whether or not perhaps, and also whether or not data sets might put people at risk if they're, you let the LLM run away and don't actually check that data and perhaps put someone in harm's way. And very briefly, selfishly, I'm a technology journalist. I'm going to out myself. And I'm here writing about how humanitarian organizations are using a technology, particularly artificial intelligence. So please say hello. Thanks.
We greatly appreciated the use cases by the doers and found them inspiring. We are concerned about losing the human in the loop and taking shortcuts on important work that could have negative impacts.
Thank you.
I think we were quite a group of neophytes around AI, except for Kate here at the table. And we were mostly interested in how this would fit into the various things we were doing, which was everything from refugee integration in the Netherlands to reading sonograms more effectively, to updating old educational materials that teachers didn't have enough time and pay to update, whether it would be useful for that. And in my case around climate change, looking at both potential interventions and public sentiment and being able to harness that in a way to actually guide the discussion around the real facts and realities rather than the things that are so politically charged and so full of disinformation. One thing that was really useful, I think, for us that Kate said is that you know everybody wants to use this, but the place it really works is when you actually have a lot of data and you have a lot of complexity that suddenly you're looking at the amount of stuff you have to do and saying, we can't. That's where AI actually works.
We talked about taking a user-centric approach that starts with the needs, and there was a conversation about internal use cases as well as those that might be more external and related to programmatic impact.
I have the support of the team here. Okay, so in our group we had the conversation here, and actually we were really surprised because most of the table already used somehow the technology of AI or big data or some ways of using this information. And we share about some of the inspirations that we have listening to the panel and how can we bring some of those insights to our business models for nowadays. But we also share about some of the challenges that we have to use this kind of AI into our day process and some of the distortions or infrastructure problems that the AI still have and the bias that can deliver sometimes depending on the way. Specifically talking about minorities and how can we be more included in a ways that we actually do social changes and enhance the way of using the technology. So yeah, mainly it was.
Thank you. I was taking notes as you were sharing your feedback, and let me see if I can summarize them. So first is that this is an AI for good discussion, but there's still a lot of concern, right? And legitimate. That's not going away. So we'll keep an eye on it. It'll affect us in so many different ways. Second is, it is useful when there is enough data, a lot of data, and importantly, as I think it was Kate that was saying, which is there has to be complexity. If it's simple, we don't need an AI. We could just use basic analysis, right? The third is that it's, there are plenty of applications where it can enhance humans, but it's not quite ready to replace anything yet, right? And the fourth is that it seems like beyond our programmatic work, the most common application is actually internal, productivity enhancing and so on, which is fabulous. That's a great way to do it. I suspect that when we come back here next year, the conversation will be very different, for good or for ill. We look forward to that. All right, thank you, and let's go to the award ceremony.